front-wheel drive actually good for anything, or is it just kind of setting you up not to be a good driver? Like, I'm foot flat to the floor and I'm just holding it and shifting it. There is no way I could drive like that in my Dodge Viper. What's up, people? So today, let's talk about front-wheel drive. Does it suck? Or is it actually kind of cool? So, I am back to my roots today in the 1988 Volkswagen Scirocco. This is one of the 16 valves, and if I'm not mistaken, this is the last year they were sold in the United States. Neat car that got great lines. I think the best looking car Volkswagen ever made. Of course, I like the wedgie sort of look and all that, and they got really rare. And it is a classic front-wheel drive hot hatch, and it's pretty cool. I have to admit though, this is going back into a total different time of my life and automotive career, shall we say. This is when I was just starting out. They were little cars, they weren't too expensive back then, but I liked them, I appreciated them. And I had people in my life like a mechanic mentor, John and Tiffin. I give him a shout out. John Aller, Air Cooled Engines Plus. You guys need to get Volkswagens worked on or your Bosch K-Jetronic figured out, he is the guy. But anyway, the Scirocco was the second car I ever had. I had one just like this, it was black. And my dad and I autocrossed an 8-valve Scirocco, so we drove that a lot. And aside from racing karts, autocrossing a race-prepared Volkswagen Scirocco, that was one that was originally prepared for SCCA IT racing, was my first competitive, taking it seriously as a young person driving. And because of that, I got a lot of time driving front-wheel drive cars, and I have some opinions. Right now, I'm gonna put the windows up so hopefully you can hear me better, but I will definitely be sweating my face off because there is no air conditioning in this car. Anyway, so back when my first car was a Volkswagen Golf, it wasn't a GTI, it was an 87 GL. Then I had the Scirocco. Those were my only two front-wheel drive cars I owned back when as everyday cars. I also had for a short time, I had a couple of minis, the original minis. One was a 64, I think, and then the other one I can't remember. It might have been a little earlier. It was a replica of the Monte Carlo rally winning mini. And anyway, so front-wheel drive. Right now, obviously just whipping it through a little second gear corner. When you're driving a front-wheel drive car, especially when it doesn't make a whole lot of power, and by a whole lot of power I mean you can't just stick your foot down and spin the tires, it's sort of irrelevant when you're going in a straight line or you're in high-speed sweepers and stuff like that. It just is. The dynamic handling ability of the car will come down entirely to how it's balanced with the size of the tires, your spring rates, your dampening, the size of your sway bars front to rear, your chassis stiffness, all the things that goes into the dynamic handling of your car. And of course, aerodynamics doesn't really matter. Let's all be honest, the wings are crap. Maybe a little, maybe for cooling, maybe it'll kill your top speed, but let's just not worry about aerodynamics. So the reason why, frankly, when I was a young person, I had the Volkswagens because they were the coolest cars you could have starting out, and also, frankly, in an affordable range, because I was first driving in the mid to late 90s, and so a Volkswagen for the late 80s had depreciated. It was a cheap car that was cool. But frankly, when I had them, I hated that they were front-wheel drive because you couldn't put the power down, and like on a go-kart, which is rear-wheel drive, that you can power slide and make work and dance and rotate, I hated it because you couldn't do that. So it drove me nuts. But like, here's a nice little S's kind of coming up and just coming down to the third here. But the neat thing about this car, front-wheel drive, is I can really easily, like, I'm foot flat to the floor and I'm just holding it and shifting it. There's no way I could drive like that in my Dodge Viper. I would be upside down in somebody's yard right now. That being said, of course, my Dodge Viper will obliterate this car in performance in every way, shape, and form. So I bring that up because, especially for a young person starting out, or somebody newer, is front-wheel drive actually good for anything? Or is it just kind of setting you up not to be a good driver? Could be both. So let's go into the experience I had and where front-wheel drive is good, and I think will help you guys, but also where I think it is bad. So I know a lot of people, when I talk about stuff from like race car driving perspective, people like to say, oh, that's not like it is on the street. Well, not really true, because race drivers want to extract the most out of it. So when I talk to you about finding the most from a car or you're driving, that's also applicable on the street so that you can be better. Also, I have to say I'm really just cruising right now, so for all you trolls that are criticizing me because I have one hand on the steering wheel, just relax. I'm surrounded by farmers' fields. Anyway, so front wheel drive, the biggest thing is if you accelerate really hard, you have the power, or you want to launch hard off the line, you cannot put the power to the ground with a front wheel drive car like you could with a rear wheel drive car. It's simple physics. When you go to accelerate, there's weight transfer to the rear, basically makes the rear heavier, jams the rear tires into the ground, and if it's rear wheel drive, they will grip better and you will accelerate better. In a front wheel drive car, the worst possible thing happens. You get weight transfer to the back, it wants to lift the front, and you have less traction, which is kind of nice to your car because it's harder to hurt a front wheel drive car doing that, but it kills your acceleration in that regard, so that kind of stinks for a racing driver as well for the street. Now, a lot of people say, well, it snows and front wheel drive is good in the snow. No, I'm gonna just argue against that. Same thing. Front wheel drive is dumb in the snow for the same reason. You have no weight transfer. Why is this thing idling high all of a sudden for no reason? Hey, car, what are you doing? Whatever. Okay. So, it's the same thing in the snow. And you guys are going, no, Casey, a rear-wheel drive car will spin out. Well, you're driving it past its limit. Duh. So anyway, same thing happens. You get the weight transfer, the fronts aren't gripping, and you just can't put any power down. The reason people like front-wheel drive cars in the snow or the rain is, and this is for beginners, you basically can't screw up on accelerating. You can spin the tires all day long, and it's not going to matter, because you're not going to go sideways and spin out. You're just going to push. Like, you could turn the wheel and still go straight and not much happens, and it'll keep going like this. Same thing's in corners. You're not going to get into the same trouble for a newer or less talented driver than a rear-wheel drive car could by putting too much power down. In a front-wheel drive car, if you put too much power down, you're just going to understeer out, okay? And this is an interesting side story. Way back when in the 90s, I think it was 90s and early 2000s, I did some of the mid-Ohio schools, the team defensive driving that they had way back when I was like 15 and a half. And then I did the 2-day or 3-day school at Mid-Ohio to get my racing license way back when. And it was funny because when I did the team defensive driving school and we were on the skid pad, the guy that was there was showing us that basically if you start spinning out, and that's not from power, but from decelerating, and your rear comes out on the front wheel drive, it was a Civic way back when, you would counter steer and use the throttle to pull yourself out, because this front wheel drive would pull yourself out of the slide. And what's funny, because then when I went back to the school for racing school, I remember Calvin Fish was up there talking to everybody in these front wheel drive cars. He's like, in his accent, he's like, now what would happen if the rear end came away like this straight away? And I don't know if that's exactly what he said. And so I answered it exactly the same that I had success with in team driving school. He's like, absolutely not. You do that, you'll be in a wall. And I'm thinking, you arrogant so-and-so, piss off. That's what I thought. Which in racing is true, but in the skid pad scenario wasn't true. So it's a fascinating thing. You just got to know the context, and I also bring that up because the context here, but I'm getting tangent. So front wheel drive is cool because for a novice it's harder to screw up. For somebody a little bit more like me, I'm gonna slow down here as a cyclist, I don't want to freak him out. For somebody that's not a novice, it's fun, but it's not fun. It's sort of like a novelty. Like, I can just throw this thing in the corners and not care. And it's not going to be a problem. Or if I want to like turn onto something sharp, so I'm going to downshift and just turn, I'll go left. You know, I can come down here, I'm going to go into first, so it makes it a little more. If I just, foot flat to the floor, I have my foot flat to the floor, and I just went through the corner like it's no big deal. It's sort of funny, it's kind of fun for me. And in some circumstances, maybe if I was rallying this or something, and it was a front wheel drive class, that's kind of cool because you can drive okay with less effort or trying. Because in no stretch of the imagination, if I was in a normal sports car, motorcycle, cart, should I be able to go through a corner like I just did in this thing? You should not be able to just jam it into gear and floor it in the one that makes the most power and get through it. So that's the area where I don't like front wheel drive, because I don't think it's the best way for you to develop talent. Now that being said, one way that I think front wheel drive does help you develop talent, like for instance, if you're autocrossing, and how I found some with the Limit, you're so limited to being able to put your power down to go fast in autocross if you're front wheel drive, that you have to scrape for every little bit of traction. You have to learn to think of just the tires. Because if you had a rear wheel drive car that was the same, you could put down power a little bit better. But a front wheel drive car, you got to think about differentials. Is it limited slip? Is it open? Is it going to blow the inside tire off? Is it going to do both? If I put too much power down and blow it off, will it just push? Or am I right on the edge where it's spinning a little bit, but I'm getting the maximum traction? And by doing that in a scenario like autocross that my dad and I did with that Scirocco way back when, that helped me develop the sense to pay attention directly to the traction of the tires. So that when I got into driving performance cars that were rear wheel drive and racing rear wheel drive, well then that sense that I developed, I just switched to paying attention to the rear wheel drive tires and the dynamics of that. So if you're into front wheel drive, especially a young person, you think you're cool because your front wheel drive car is all fast and everything like this, you need to realize the car's positives, its limitations, places that it can help you learn, and places that it can help make you a terrible driver. Because if you just think you had the best thing in the world and you could just do this and drive it like that and drive every car like that, then you go hop in a Corvette or a Viper or something and you can't handle it and you wreck it, well, it's not the Corvette or the Viper's fault, person. It's yours. So just realize that. Do I like front wheel drive? I don't hate it. I think it's got its place. I think it's cool to have a car that you can be so, like, what's the word, like forgiving on your driving style. Also, front wheel drive is good from an engineering standpoint because it's very easy to package the car. You can have a transverse layout, the engine and the transaxle all attached. You can just plug it right in there, drives the front wheels, everything. You got all your complexity here. And then since you don't have a drive shaft and a differential and everything back here, that gives the engineers and the manufacturers more ability to create room. So I really, in looking back now and revisiting sort of my early years of driving sports cars by having the Scirocco, it's funny because like I hated it back then because I couldn't put the power down and I wanted to power slide and do cool stuff. So I got rid of it. But now that I'm older, I appreciate it for what it is, even though, let's be honest, it's slow. Like all the cars I have will beat this thing. But I still like it. I still think it's cool and it's nostalgic. But I think the reason why, looking back, I like the car more now and I enjoy it is because I've grown as a person and I don't have anything to prove. Because I've raced cars, I've raced motorcycles, you know, I've driven stuff with 700 horsepower, 6,000 pounds of downforce. You know, I've driven extreme stuff and, you know, I feel pretty confident with my ability to drive. So I don't have to climb mountains anymore that I don't want to. Like I've already grown. So now when I go back to revisit, it's easier for me to just appreciate this car for what it is. It's a really cool hot hatchback, and it's easier for me to appreciate front wheel drive for what it is. Something that's nice and packaging for engineering. It's really forgiving, so you can just hustle the car around and throw it around and have a lot of fun and not have to worry or think too much. And honestly, for a guy like me that's doing Genius Garage and all these builds and YouTube and everything, it's nice to have less stress now and then. So I think for you front wheel drive guys out there, enjoy it, you know, but whether you're young or old, if you aspire to something more, if you aspire to be a better driver, the time will come, and time will come very quickly, that you need to get yourself a rear wheel drive sports car, and you're gonna grow past that car. Doesn't mean there's anything wrong with the car, but that is what that means. And I'll give you an example, which is a parallel. The people that just do track days, you know, like whether it's Porsche Club or I think it's Chin track days, whatever, you know, the club track days that are out there, everybody does it. Those are a lot of fun, but it's not real racing. And when an expert class at a driving day still requires passing only in like certain straightaways and you have to give the guy a point by, yeah, you're gonna outgrow that really quickly. And the reason I don't go to those track days, even if I want to test a street car, is I don't want to be in an environment where it's like kindergarten with rubber baby buggy bumpers. It's like, if you're actually good, then there's no point buys and there's no only passing in straightaways. It's just an open test session, and don't be stupid. And if the environment has to be like that, that means the people in that group aren't that good. So I'm saying that because if you're gonna get good and you wanna compete at a higher level, then the time will come for you to move past autocross. The time will come for you to move past front wheel drive. Just saying. So it's not a knock on it, but all those things are great fun in their arena. They all have a time and they all have a place. But, you know, we have to realize their limitations and just enjoy them for what they are. Kind of like this Scirocco, right? All right, let's have a little fun. Hopefully I don't get busted. Scirocco's kind of neat, actually, and this one got converted to have a 5th gear from a diesel, so it's actually taller, which is great on the highway, but if you're just zipping around, it's a little taller, so 5th gear is going to be sort of like an overdrive. The Scirocco's kind of funky. It feels like you should shift it quicker, because it's not super cammy, but it, you know, the red line's 7,000 RPMs, which for the 80s is pretty high for not being a Dorito-powered Mazda. And this one, I just got to remember to rev it out more, which I guess I got lazy because I got tons of torque in the Viper and tons of torque on the Omega car, the turbo diesel. So it's sort of fun, but it cruises nice. This has got nice coilovers on it. It's got really great brakes and a braided flexible line, so the brakes are awesome and it handles good and it's forgiving and it looks cool too, and it's fun to rev. So anyway, guys, I hope you enjoyed this. Just want to talk about front wheel drive a little bit, the pros and cons and what that means, and I hope you get something out of it. But remember, for all you guys that are interested in performance driving, learn to feel the edge of adhesion of the tires. Learn to know how much you're spinning. Are you spinning the inside? Are you spinning the outside? Are you spinning both? How much is that affecting your handling? Especially at lower speeds when you can break them loose, because presumably your front wheel drive car doesn't make that much power. And that will help you be better when you transition into something faster, something that makes a lot more power. It's rear wheel drive. It's kind of more of a proper, really fast sports car. And also remember, front wheel drive can be very good because when you're on the throttle or off the throttle, it doesn't make a lot of power, but you're going to be working a lot on your car's dynamic balance through corners. So if you need to just breathe on the throttle, breathe off the throttle just a little bit, like you're going through a sweeper here and it's stepping out, and you need to, you know, get on it or breathe or whatever you need to do to affect the car's dynamic the handling, and you're adjusting your sway bars to get that mid-corner balance right, that's also going to be something that's a really helpful time of your driving life and environment to tune your skills when you move up. And I'll say, for all you young people out there that maybe don't have a lot of money to spend on cars or to build something with a lot of horsepower, don't worry about it. Here's why. Last tip. Kart racing is so amazing to become a good driver because, first of all, it's very close, it's very crazy. But the people that go out and buy a shifter kart really fast typically are those dudes that are like, I'm really muscly and I race dirt bikes. I'm really cool. I'm going to use my bravado to show you what's up. And that works good at amateur levels in shifter kart. And I don't understand why I'm going to be a crappy race car driver one day. Okay, so I was stereotyping, but the stereotype's pretty true. When you start out in karts, get something that is single speed, okay? It doesn't really matter if it's cool 4-stroke or 2-stroke. But the reason that's very important is for you to be very fast and consistent, you have to be able to conserve the speed. You don't scrub off any more than you have to. You have to enter that corner as fast as possible. You have to carry as much speed through that corner as fast as possible, right on the edge. And you have to be on the throttle. You have to maximize everything. But in a shifter kart, at the amateur level, somebody with a lot of bravado and physical fitness can go out there willy-nilly and beat people, but they're not learning anything. They're not getting to that edge. They're not able to do it consistently, and their career will go nowhere. And it's kind of like cars like this. So for you young people out there that can't afford it much, you don't have the fastest car in the world, maybe it's not that great, it doesn't matter. You don't have to have racing slicks to learn and become a better driver. You don't have to have coilovers. You don't have to have this stuff. You just have to have you, okay? The people that spend tons of money on, like, just building their car up for autocross, it doesn't necessarily gonna make them great. You just have to know what you're doing and grow. And if you grow and you maximize your talent, your braking, your acceleration, your adhesion, everything, your downshifting, your steering, well, then you're gonna be great as you move up and you have better opportunities in the future. So I just wanted to tell you that. I think front wheel drive can be pretty cool. It's got a time and a place. It works good for engineering and packaging. It can work great for young people. It can work great for daily transportation. It's kind of hot in here. Daily transportation, so you don't have to worry about spinning out and stuff. Is it the ultimate performance car in the world? No. Of course, the Minis did great way back when with their front-wheel drive and packaging to win rallies and stuff, but is front-wheel drive my first choice to build a car? Absolutely not. Does it have a place? Yes. Is there going to be a time in your career to move on? Yes. Is it kind of fun for me to revisit my teenage days and college days in this Volkswagen Scirocco? Yes. So I hope you guys enjoyed this stuff, and hope you guys enjoyed riding on the Scirocco too. I'll see you next time.